and the Lord's will. Everybody this morning, thanks for coming. I don't know whether you turned that on yet, John, or not, but great to see you have visitors with us. Thank you for sharing in our Bible study this morning. We're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 here in just a moment, and we're going to talk more about this wisdom and what this, how he defines himself as the preacher, what he was witnessing and seeing in his world, and how he was reacting to that, and how he was trying to find answer and where to turn to. And ultimately, he understands that where is the only place you can really turn to? It's to God, right? God's the only place you can really turn to make it work when you see all the challenges and difficulties that often create various things for man. And so we'll get back into that study here in just a moment. But if you would, let's bow our heads together and let's share in a word of prayer before we get into our discussion this morning. Father in heaven, thank you for this day that you've blessed us with. Thank you for this opportunity to open our Bibles together to appreciate the testimony from your word. Thank you for loving us and caring for us in such a way to provide us this wisdom and guidance. You know best for man. You created us. You put all things here for us to benefit from that's good in this world. And so we just trust in you. We put our faith and confidences in you, and thank you for caring for us on a daily basis. Give us an appreciation for your word today. Help us to understand it better and then use it to our benefit. And we pray all these things through thy Son's name. Amen. So at the beginning of chapter 4, he has a pretty good discussion about how evil man had gotten, right? He talks about people in authority allowing for oppression to occur and not creating any answers or resolve to that. He paints a pretty, we kind of defined Wednesday night in our discussion, a little bit what we might say is a cynical view of the world. He didn't like much of what he was seeing, at least what he was describing anyway, as it relates to those things, at least in the initial part of the conversation. In verse 8, notice, I'm just back you up a little further than where we want to pick up or where we left off on Wednesday. But he said, there is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches, neither saith he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. So he introduces this next section or this next conversation by telling the audience, the reader, that he has seen a guy who has no one that he's responsible for, right? He doesn't have a brother he's trying to help take care of. He doesn't have a family. He's by himself, and yet all he does is work, and store it all away, right? He's already talked about the vanity of that earlier in the writing. He's come back to that themology here, and it comes to this individual he's generically witnessed as it relates to that. But that's the lead-in to what he's about to say. How vain it is to see a guy working by himself, no one to care for, no one to connect to, and to be of help to, and yet just works to his own demise in so many senses. Then this, verse 9. Two are better than one, he says, because they have a good reward for, in some ways the operative word, their labor. No longer is it just one guy patting himself on the back saying, look at all the stuff I've built and gained, and look at how hard I've worked to receive all these benefits. He says it's far better when two work together and they can say the results of that labor are theirs collectively. That's a principle, by the way, that I think is effective in many areas in life. It's better in families, it's better in workplaces, and to us in our conversations, it's better here, right? It's better in relationship to the work and purposes and causes of a local body of believers. And he illustrates that, verse 10, and we read through this Wednesday, just didn't get a chance to talk about it much. But he said, for if they fall, he gives us this general description, for if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Most of us have probably experienced that, right? Where you've fallen down and you've got nobody but yourself to try to figure out how am I going to get up. In fact, just yesterday it happened to me when I stumbled over a cooler. It was sitting anyway, and the poor field commander stand bit the dust for half a second when I fell while I was pulling it. But anyway, right? And it's got to get up on your own. But if there's somebody there to reach a helping hand, and to help, that's a much better circumstance. Again, he says in verse 11, if two lie together, then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone? They can benefit from that. He's just using these generic kinds of descriptions. If one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So two people can help each other out, and they benefit from each other. They share in the labor, and so the work is theirs. If one has a problem or something that they need help with, there's somebody right there readily available to them to add assistance to them. If somebody tries to harm them, if they have somebody with them, it's helpful for protective purposes. And then he even adds, if you could add a third person, if you add another person into that mix, that the three cord is kind of hard to break. And there's benefit in that. I think he's simply saying that work by yourself is vanity of vanities. Work for selfish ambitions. Work to just get it and gain it for your own selfish benefit, and be consumed with what do I get out of this is vanity of vanities. Work together with others, and that collective work benefits the full cord of people. That's real benefit. That's the kind of behavior or the way that we ought to think. So let's talk about that for a minute. So when Jesus sent his disciples out, in what manner did he send them? Two by two, right? He didn't send them out by themselves. He sent them, and he did that in multiple ways. We often talk about the limited commission, right? There was a moment in the early ministry of Jesus where he sends them out to begin to set the stage for his coming kingdom. Then later he offers them what we often refer to as the Great Commission, which is the permanent work that they had once his death, burial, and resurrection and ascension back into heaven occurs. And so he sends them out to present his message in those two different ways. But he sends them together. He understands, number one, he understands the danger that they're going to be in. And we know that various occasions that you'd find Paul and Silas in prison, right? You'd find them in trouble. And so Jesus understood the challenges they would face. And so even he uses this wisdom, for lack of a better description, that comes from Ecclesiastes of knowing the benefit of having more than one. Collectively, as a body of believers, it's not one individual's work. The body has many roles, functions, works, but at the end, the body of believer, it's one body that has one head, which is Christ. Okay, so the body has a singular leader, right, and on the top of it. Even those who fulfill leadership roles within the body in various forms, they don't bear the authority within themselves. They simply use the authority of Jesus, right? They answer to the head. They answer to the one who that body belongs to. And so his guidance, his instructions have to be paramount. But the body needs everybody, right? And then it becomes our work. It's not one person's effort. It's not just one person's work. It's our collective work. And it's something that we all can feel a part of and belong to and find a role in and find a place to be part of. And then no one's glorying in their own personal successes. It is simply about this is what God has set forth for His body of believers to be involved in, and we are working together to fulfill that, each finding their place and role in that process. The challenge to that is that you can't ever think of any role being insignificant. Because the minute people begin to believe that their part or role or function within the body is insignificant, it might lend it themselves to the idea that they have no purpose at all, right? It's pretty easy sometimes to lower what we believe is our significance in things to the point where I feel like I'm so insignificant that I don't need to be involved at all. And that if 2 are better than 1, and 3 are better than 2, 20 are better than 3, I think, right? I think that's the principle here. That the more that are working collectively together to find a place and purpose, then that work is strengthened and benefited, and it becomes the work of the whole rather than just 1 or 2 individuals. Your thoughts on that text, things you thought of when you read through that. Go ahead, Brian.
Edification it's about your spiritual life, but it's also about others' physical life, what's around you in this life as well.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, we push this so much, but there's a reflection on that, of what we do every day for each other.
Sure. Yeah, that collective work doesn't just happen in moments. It happens daily, right? As we strengthen and encourage and bring benefit to one another. What else maybe you thought of when you read through that text that I didn't reference or talk about?
General, my brain went back to Genesis. From the very beginning, God looked at man and said it's not good for him to be alone.
Yeah.
He created Eve to work with him. So in that general sense, from the very beginning, that was a concept.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that you see it early on, God's, even in a sense, then God's recognition that aloneness was not good for man, and that His intention from the beginning was to have union and working together in that sense. Go ahead, Jim.
The church must have unity.
Yeah.
You all got to work together.
You as the old saying goes, right? It's hard to push a rope, and sometimes when people are trying to do work against each other in some senses, it's hard to get much function. So you're right. I think you can't have 2 or 3 functioning together if they're putting each other in conflict all the time. And so certainly unity is going to be a necessary aspect for this to work. And let's talk about that for a minute. So just in general, what does unity require of people? Okay, it requires cooperation. In what ways, and you can think of it generically, but think of it as a body of believers too, but so in what ways do people have to cooperate? What's it take? Maybe that's a better question. What's it take to work cooperatively?
Everybody has to be on the same page.
Okay, so you got to get on the same page, and if you're going to get on the same page, what's that require? Okay, sometimes, and among the people, right, opinions have to be set aside, but the page is the book, right? The page, when we say get on the same page, that's a fair statement, but the page is already written, and that page is the headship of Jesus that's delivered through the testimony of God's Word. So the definition of the work, and that's the challenge sometimes that bodies of believers have, is they determine, well, this is the work we want to do, and we're going to collectively do that. And they're very good at times at fulfilling those things. But the first question that has to be asked is, what has God instructed us to do? What is God? That's the first question. Where does God rest on this particular thing? What has He said about that? And there may be expediencies and the manner in which we fulfill that, where members have to be able to work together, and one idea may be as good as another. But when it comes to fulfilling the authority of Christ, that's the primary. And then those groups work cooperatively together to fulfill those defined, authorized purposes.
I'm thinking complementary, not with the I, but with the E.
Yeah.
Complement each other.
Yeah.
You know, try and match each other complement with what this book says.
Yeah.
And would that be a shadow of what you do? Would that be a reflection of what you do? Paul talks about in the New Testament being one mouth and one mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how you start being one mouth.
Yeah.
Right?
Is to let the word speak for itself. Yep.
I probably wasn't clear, but when I think of compromise, people have to drop their pride, their self-importance, and all of that. They have to compromise themselves to conform.
Yeah. Not actually what you meant. That the idea is it can't be about me and somebody else's expediency and manner in which it might be just as effective. And I'm not going to stomp and snort because it wasn't my idea. And we certainly have to have that mindset to be able to function. Go ahead, Lou.
I was thinking of the song, none of self and all of thee.
Yeah. Vacate me and all on the Lord. And truthfully, I firmly believe this. If I can do that, if I'll humble myself enough, let me rephrase it. If I'll humble myself, sometimes when you qualify a statement, it's not enough. There's not enough, right? Like it's like, here's the amount of humility that's sufficient. But if I humble myself and put the Lord first, all these other things will come right in line. You won't have an issue with argumentative, divisiveness, those kinds of things. They'll go away when humility sets in first, attention's upon the authority of Christ, and then all the rest of those things fall in place as they should.
Should all be a common goal. With that common goal, no one should have to be begged to be a part of it.
Yeah.
They should, and no one should have to have, oh, please come.
Yeah.
It should be something that people want to do.
Right. And I agree with you, Kim. I'll come back to you, Jeff, here in just a second. But So the authoritative page is God's word, and then here might be a way we're fulfilled. Here's a work. Here's a purpose that we've decided this is something we're going to do to fulfill this God-given authorized work. And we all ought to get on board with that. Then it becomes our work, and we all ought to feel sufficiently compelled without prod and to get on board with that. And I think you're right. I think it takes that for unity to work. It takes that. If everybody thinks, well, that wasn't my idea, or I don't think that's a good idea, then it's kind of hard to get much done when there's that resistance and I have that stubbornness about me that if it didn't fit my line of thinking. Yeah, and we do. Yeah, we do. Go ahead.
Compromise is one of those words that makes our human nature cringe because it sounds like we have to give something up. I would say more communication.
Yeah.
Because you have God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit all working together and communicating in perfect harmony when they created the world.
Yeah.
If you go back to Genesis.
Yeah.
Communication is the basis of all understanding.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think unity requires it, right? What happens, what causes discord a lot of times is sometimes not what is said. Sometimes discord happens and divisiveness happens by what isn't communicated. and somebody would just rather sit over here and fume you know what I mean, and have ill will and bad feelings about something, rather than just sitting down with somebody and having a conversation. Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
I can't hear everything that everybody's
Sure.
saying, so if I repeat something's already said, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But what I was thinking was the bond that you have with your fellow brother,
Yeah.
the bond that you have in your marriage. It brings that bond strengthens your tie. It brings about peace of mind. It brings about togetherness. It's a unity bond, and nothing is more productive than what that is.
Yeah.
That can take you through so many hard times.
Sure. That bond of relationship is important in this process, and I think it brings more benefit than we give credit to it. When two or three join themselves genuinely, bond themselves together in purpose, it has not only a benefit in getting that purpose fulfilled, but it also benefits those people in growing in their relationship, and the benefit that brings itself. Sometimes you can, and I'm careful here because there's some things we could all go do and I'd still probably not enjoy it. If we all said, let's go paint a house somewhere, I'd go help you, but I wouldn't like any of it. But you might, right? But sometimes even things that are tedious, the work isn't really what's on your mind. It's that we're working together and we're bonding together, and I think that's part of this. Yep. Anything else you thought of? I didn't want to give you a chance on that text. Oh, sorry, Jim.
You gotta be careful. Paul talked about one person trying to run the whole thing.
Yeah, and this approach avoids that when it's a collective work together, and of course John dealt with Diotrephes and others who like to have the preeminence among the people, and you read some of John's writings. All right, so he turns. So all right, he's just kind of giving us quips, if you will, of thoughts here in the narrative. So verse 13, he says, "Better is a poor and a wise child than an old and foolish king." Interesting, isn't it? "Who will no more be admonished. For out of prison he cometh to reign, whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor." I've thought about this. Phraseology is challenging a little bit here. But number one, let's appreciate the first part of this in verse 13. So the contrast is, you'd be better off poor and wise, and what's the third element there? Poor, wise, and young. Poor, wise, and young, right? A poor and wise child. Poor, wise, and young is better than foolish, old, and a king, royalty. Who what? What's the fourth qualifier? Who won't listen anymore. He can't be admonished. Now, we have talked several times, in the outset of our study, we established we believed this was Solomon that wrote this, and we gave our reasonings behind that. As we've walked through the narrative, we've pointed out some things that at least give you pause as to whether or not, how does that fit a man like Solomon? And it's interesting because if this is Solomon, he describes himself in a very interesting way, right? He talks about the fact that in his earthly human pursuits, he became foolish, right? That's the sentiment of the writer. As he tried to get smarter in relating to human earthly things, that wisdom only created vanity, and it created challenges and difficulties for him. That's the only thing that resulted. And yet he said, through it all, The wisdom of God was still there, that He had granted me when I started this process, but I was letting the foolish human side take precedent, and it created greater challenges for me. And so He said, you'd be better off, you'd be better off wise and young with nothing than to get like me, or like this king He's referring to, who over time and age became very foolish because of all these human pursuits. And the saddest part was he had reached a point where admonition was of no value. I've always said that's the scary place to get spiritually, and in other ways too. To reach a point where you just refuse to listen to anything anymore is a challenge. And he said that he had reached a point where admonition didn't even work for him anymore.
Interesting. Looking at verse 13 and 14 together, I'm starting to see a little bit of Proverbs style of writing.
Yeah, and if it is Solomon, then that would make sense, right? Because he wrote much. Well, and again, if it's him, then I think you could see a lot of foolishness in the older years of King Solomon and the choices that he makes, and so he may very well be as it relates to that. Yeah.
You get to the point that you think you know everything. There's nothing anybody can say to you.
Yeah. If we make those kinds of conclusions, like I've already attained every ounce of understanding of anything that is ever going to be necessary for me, it's kind of hard, and you can't even admonish. And admonition, by the way, isn't even the strongest of right. That the word, he didn't use the word rebuke. This fella has gotten so calloused in his foolishness that even admonition, an encouragement to rethink something, won't even have an effect on him. What do you think he means, this idea, for out of prison he cometh to reign, whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor?
Well, you can come from nothing, and if you have a good head on your shoulders,
Yeah.
you can go pretty far if you have God behind you, all that, the whole thing, the whole package.
Yeah.
But you can have everything and then just lose it, blink of an eye, by foolish choices.
Yeah, and I think that is the point I think he's driving at. That better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king who had everything handed to him and still lost. And yet you've got somebody else who came from nothing, and they may now be reigning.
Another way you can say is, how people say it takes a lifetime to build up a reputation in a moment, one instance or one thing, it's gone.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah. And if you add verse 15, I considered all the living which walk under the sun, with the second child that shall stand up in his stead. You know where that one's coming from. And you might think that there's but the second may come from completely different circumstances, and you don't feel like you needed admonition. I don't need correctiveness. I don't need any instruction, and it places them in a pretty callous circumstance. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
I had the opinion, if they use the word prison, I don't necessarily think it means a criminal in prison, but maybe bondage for a slave or something like that.
Yeah, and it may very well be that somebody who came from some source by which you would not have expected them to rise to a level of kingship. And great kings, because of their foolishness and refusal to be admonished, the next thing you know, they fall, and it's to all the living experience those kinds of things. There is no end, he says, verse 16, of all the people, even all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So, and if Solomon's criticizing himself, I suppose that's a possibility here. He could be looking back as an older man and thinking about all the squandered years, right, and all the devastation that he had created by not honoring God as he should. You know, we forget sometimes that Solomon, in all his wisdom, his major downfall was what? Okay, well, and I wasn't going to say it quite that way, Judy, but I'm glad you did and not me, because that could have caused problems for me. But here's the thing, and let's make clear this. They had their faults, but it's his fault, because he had been told, right? God had advised, not just advised, he had instructed him, don't do that. If you go and marry women from all these idolatrous nations, they're going to drag you into their idolatry. Well, no surprise, he married all kinds of women from all kinds of idolatrous circumstances, and the next thing you know, Solomon's building high places here and there and everywhere for these wives to be able to go and worship their gods, and so in many senses the women were just doing what they had been raised to believe and do. Solomon was the one, again, if this is him, Solomon is the one who should have known better, but that was his demise. He just took just about anything, including women from every nation around about that he so desired to put into his household, and the next thing you know, they've take him down a path of idolatry. And the saddest part, in so many ways, is he has set the stage. Though blessed with the wisdom of God, he has set the stage for the division that's about to happen in the kingdom, and the divisiveness that's going to occur that ultimately will send the united people of Israel into two camps. Israel to the north, taking those 10 with them, and the 2 that remain to the south, creating Judah. And so much of his behaviors are somewhat, at least the lead-ins to the challenges that the nation faces as a result of that, and then the squabbling that occurs among the brothers as they relate to trying to figure out who's going to lead and who's going to be responsible, and which one should we follow, and it's interesting. So, no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them, they also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Remember earlier he said great things can happen in one's life, but it doesn't take very many years for that to just be forgotten, right? And if your effort in life is, and every ounce of your energies is about building some long-term legacy, then that's vanity of vanities, because generally speaking, it doesn't take long for history to be forgotten. And what have you spent all this time for? And even after people look back and witness what this man had become, he said, will they rejoice in the behaviors and choices and the foolishness and the vexation of spirit and soul that they had seen, and the vanities that this man pursued? And so it's a tremendous warning to all of us, even though we may not be kings and though we may not have these royal aspirations that he speaks of here, but it is a reminder that if we're spending all this energy and time in earthly thought and in worldly pursuits, it's only to our demise if we do that. And foolishness generally follows it. And we create a lot of extra challenges for ourselves when we do that. Give you the last 30 seconds. Last thought. Go ahead, Brian. I'll come back.
Games will come and go. Technologies and knowledge will come and go. There's one thing that has never been lost on this earth. It never has been, it never will be, and that's God's words.
Yeah. Of all the things that have come to light and gone into darkness, the light of God has been around since creation. Go ahead, Judy. I saw you.
I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think Solomon went after these women because he wanted the women. He went after the women because of what marrying them brought to his kingdom.
And that's an aspect we don't necessarily pursue a lot with Solomon, but I think there is some truth to that. These were almost as much treaties with other nations as it was pursuit of these situations. Appreciate all the thoughts. We'll use the review questions Wednesday night to remind ourselves of chapter 4, and then we'll jump into